an influencer in the Seattle area, one of the biggest influencers in this day, who has amassed more than 1 million followers, is being accused of being a squatter and a con man. We played a story from Jonathan Cho on these accusations against Steve Hickey yesterday. Today, Steve Hickey is going to join us to respond to them. This is a woman with 4 kids. Mm-hmm. Why not move out and let her live in her home while it's being disputed? Or do you lose your leverage that way?
There's certainly a leverage complaint. Why would I move out when I've been wronged by the previous owner? I've had hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from me in this transaction. And now I just give up the stolen goods?
This goes back to a story, and we've talked about squatters a lot on the show. And typically you think of squatters as someone who, breaks into a rundown house, sets up shop, and then refuses to leave. Or like the case in Bellevue that we've been dealing with, where you have he started as a real tenant, then he refused to pay rent for 2 years. So we've talked about several horror stories, but this story of alleged squatting is very, very different. And it's very interesting because of the person who's allegedly doing the squatting. So this all started with an expose done by a YouTuber with more than 6 million followers, whose name is Tyler Oliveira. Tyler comes to town to do a long piece on the squatting issue that we're having in Washington State because of some of our crazy laws. And he does it alongside our friend Jonathan Cho with the Discovery Institute, who, with Tyler's help, they do a series of reports on varying levels of squatting. And one of them was what they're calling a white-collar squatter. A guy named Steve Hickey, who, if you're not familiar with him, he is a big-time independent journalist, guerrilla journalist, and he does it all on social media. So he's amassed this huge following. But here's part of the story that Tyler and Jonathan Cho aired about 2 weeks ago.
What happens when you buy a home, there's an old tenant who's been living in there rent-free for the last 2 years, who refuses to leave, leaving you with $1.4 million less dollars, stuck with legal fees in court for the last 8 months, and forcing you and your 4 kids to move in with your mom and dad? Well, that's allegedly the case of our alleged white-collar squatter, Steve Hickey.
We just want to take a look at the squatting epidemic in the United States, but this is unique because we have a guy in a position of power, relative wealth, doing well for himself. He's not some degenerate, jobless bum breaking into someone's house. This is a well-known figure in the community. Is he legally allowed to be there right now?
Based on what I can tell, the answer is no. He's not only an industry colleague, I would consider him a friend. Somebody who's given me news tips, somebody who's helped me out in the field, like one of the nicest guys you'll meet. But the allegations are just too ridiculous now to ignore. So as a journalist, I've just got to be objective now. He has more than 1 million followers on all of his social media platforms, and he's just well respected, and he does decent work, especially during a time when American journalism is in decline. Frankly, I've called him several times already and had private conversations, and I'm like, dude, I don't know if these are true, these allegations that is, but if they are, you got to settle these. And I've just tried to walk them off the cliff and say, look, man, it's not worth your career.
So these 2 major influencers, one national, one Jonathan Cho here in Seattle, they do this story. They do this expose on Steve Hickey. They confront him, and this thing has taken on a life of its own. So after these stories come out, there's been protests. There was just one this past weekend against Steve Hickey, his face all over posters saying that he is squatting in this home that belongs to a mother who wants to live there with her 4 kids. Now, ever since that happened, and all this has gained momentum and traction, other allegations have began to surface against Steve Hickey. So there's the initial squatting allegation that comes out, gets millions of views. But after that, there are dozens of individuals who came forward making other allegations against Steve Hickey. He used to own a construction company called Meridian Build Group. It went under, and he left a ton of contractors and subcontractors unpaid. And they're all livid over it. And they're now starting to come out and tell their stories. He's also being accused of using his position as a fire commissioner to help him get better videos for social media, to get to scenes faster, to use equipment, to be able to get some of these videos that he pushes out there that get a ton of views. So here's the thing. There's a lot to unpack here. But Steve Hickey agreed to come into our studio, sit down with me and go through these accusations in detail. So what I want to do today is play some clips from those interviews. And I really want to take it point by point. And let's start with the accusation of squatting. So Steve Hickey says that he had a contract with the previous owner of this massive home in Ravensdale. And it was a lease with an option to buy. So essentially, he was leasing it to live there, but he had an option in 5 years to buy the home. He says when he tried to exercise that option, the deal got messy. He claims the homeowner at the time tried to change things around on him at the last moment. And so they get in this big disagreement over it. And the owner ends up selling the home. When Hickey stops paying rent, he sells it to someone else, a woman named Katrina Freitag. Now, the three of them are in this complex legal situation. Is it squatting or is it not squatting? Is it simply just a really complicated case involving a real estate transaction gone bad? Here's part of my conversation with Steve. Do you want to continue on with the original agreement that you could finalize and purchase the home? Do you want to buy the home at this point?
I see the only pathway at this point is a settlement. I mean, you can't, she's paid more than I would have had to pay. She can't just give me the keys. I guess in some world that would be possible, but in reality, that's probably not an
So you don't want the home at this point?
Where I was is I wanted to put it on market. But I don't see how that would make any sense at this point. We're not going to resell the home. I think we just need to sit down, the three of us, and settle this out, which myself and my attorney have been trying to get them to do. Is just get to a settlement, and then we go our separate ways.
So settle, pay you out for your troubles as part of this, and then she keeps the home and she gets to move into the home.
I would see that as being a possibility.
Now, why not? This is a woman with 4 kids. Why not move out and let her live in her home while it's being disputed? Or do you lose your leverage that way?
There's certainly a leverage complaint. Why would I move out when I've been wronged by the previous owner? I've had hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from me in this transaction. And now I just give up the stolen goods?
Well, but as you said there, you've been wronged by the previous owner.
I have no complaints about Steve up through 2021.
Okay.
It was in 2022, in April in particular, that he stopped making payments. And after April, we went through a phase where he was trying to renegotiate the deal. We never could come to terms with each other on that renegotiation. And in June of 2022, he told us he was going to purchase the property, which was great. We, in fact, signed papers. Notary came to our house in Arizona. Everything looked good, but the money never transferred. It never happened.
So after a year and a half of not paying his rent, you sell this property while he's still in it to Katrina?
Yes, and we were very upfront about the situation at the time. Once she's able to get him out of there and get the property back up to speed, her equity will, I think, cover. No.
And Katrina thought he may leave?
I believe that's true, but you should ask her.
Attorneys reviewed the situation. He was in the house, and I believe it was a 5-year lease agreement was to be up end of September, and he had not paid rent.
So it was under your belief that he would leave the property at what point in time?
When I purchased the home, we submitted a vacate notice and lease termination for 90 days. December 31st, he was to be moved out.
And did he move out?
No, he has squatted since.
You already have said that you want some sort of settlement for basically what you've been through, and that she'll probably keep the home.
I don't know if that's settlement, resolution.
Resolution. Which doesn't involve you taking the keys and living there. So you're already saying that you're not going to live there. Like, this lady will probably move her family in.
I'm saying that would probably be the path of least resistance to get to resolution between all of us.
Why not just let her move her family in? Because that wouldn't preclude you from getting a settlement still from your previous owner. The court case would continue, right?
So because she comes in and just purchases it from somebody else who was on title, I should then just give her that home? That doesn't make any sense.
Well,
not legally. There's legal precedent for the pathway that we're going on here. This isn't just, hey, let's shoot from the hip, see what we can do.
Yeah.
There's legal precedent here.
And I'm not telling you to do anything, but I'm asking you why not do that? Because and I'm trying to sort of explain this. I get it, it's a complicated situation. This is why I don't think this is a squatter situation.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't think this is a squatter situation. However, it seems, one, really messy. But if you already know that the resolution that's most likely does not involve you just being given this house, right? Or being able to finalize
It never would be given the house. That was never
or to
a thought,
finalize it. You want your money back, basically, right?
I would
you
like
want your money back that you
at
put
minimum,
into
yes.
the house.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
and so my thought is, why not let this lady and her 4 kids live there? Because you still have the court case going on. You're still actively pursuing a case to get the money back.
We should all 3 get to
Yeah.
a settlement table then and get this done.
Do you think it would be an act of good faith to move out of the house while you wait for that resolution? Because what happens at the end of the day, Steve, if the judge does not rule in your favor?
I will have to accept that, but I also think an act of good faith is coming to the settlement table.
And they haven't done that?
No, they have not.
Not done to the
We've even
settlement
sent
table.
settlement offers out and not gotten responses.
Yeah. So you're free to settle. And you think if they were coming to the table, if they were actively negotiating with you, would you be willing to leave the house?
If we got into active negotiations, we would get to resolution quickly, I'm sure.
I think so.
I'm quite confident in that.
Yeah. I do want to ask you about something you said in a video because it really struck me. And actually, we talked about it offline already.
The woman you've seen in the video who now claims to be a poor single mother of 4, though she leaves out the fact that she paid nearly $1.4 million in hard liquid cash, as she does have considerable wealth.
You seem to kind of try to vilify her for having the money to buy the house
yeah.
outright. It came across that way.
Yeah, thank you for asking on
Do you
this.
feel like it came across that way?
It certainly did based on the comments I saw. It was unintentional. My
Okay.
point in mentioning that was specifically saying there were red flags here. The fact that it could not be financed was an indicator that there was a problem.
Yeah.
I don't care how much money she has. More power to her. She needed to have money to come into this.
It was
deal.
apparently from a divorce settlement.
So be it. However it came through, it's her money to do with as she pleases, and more power to her. My comment specifically was saying, you knew you couldn't finance this. You did it in cash. So somebody was telling you, hey, you should be concerned about this. You may want to actually get to resolution before closing.
So here's the thing. My opinion is this obviously isn't a traditional squatting case. There are obviously some legal things that are being worked out in a court of law. There's an ongoing legal case here trying to sort out essentially what would happen. But while I don't think it's a squatting case, it doesn't mean I think it's right. And it doesn't mean I think he has a good moral, legal cause or reason to continue to be in that home. And one of the things I was trying to articulate there to Steve, and I guess I'm Pollyannish, but I always think, can you do what's right while also sorting it out? And you have the legal case. So if you win the legal case, you can still get your money back without actually being physically in the home when that happens. The legal case and it proceeding, whether he's in the home while it's happening, has no bearing because he's not making an argument about possession of the home or being in the home. That's not the end he's trying to achieve. He's not arguing that he wants to stay in the home. So that's not even an outcome that he's shooting for. It's almost like he's staying in the home for leverage. So I don't think it's a squatting case. That doesn't mean I think it's right. And look, when does he plan to leave? And could it become a squatting situation? I asked him that very question. Here's what he said. So are you fully prepared to and plan to stay in that home until there's a judgment?
I am fully prepared to get to a point where we settle. That's why we've called for summary judgment. We don't feel the need to wait till the end of the year for resolution. We push for summary judgment to happen at the end of June based off a certain number of provisions saying we can get this solved now, let's do it. If we can't, and they're still not willing to come to the negotiating table, that's something they need to also look in the mirror and understand why that is.
And if the judge does not rule in your favor, going back to the squatting claim, will you leave?
It was absolutely. If that's,
No
I don't have a
question.
choice at that point.
You're not going to make him go through some sort of crazy process to get you out, right?
Let's see what he comes back with as a ruling, but I will honor the court process. That's where I wanted this thing to stay.
So I'm going to take him at his word for that and hope that he's being honest, that, if the court doesn't rule in his favor, that he's going to get out of there and allow Katrina to take over the home. So I want to move on to the second allegation here. Again, we're going to take these one by one because the squatting thing comes out and then all of a sudden there are all these people who did business with Steve when he had a construction company called Meridian Build Group that say he screwed them over, that he's a con man, that he stole money from them, that he left them unpaid. And this is just factual. You can see the documentation with L&I. There are a number of subcontractors who were working on projects for Steve who were left unpaid to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars after he, in his words, wound down Meridian Build Group. So I wanted to get into it with him about, what happened and what those subcontractors were left with. And I will say, of all the allegations, this is the one that he seems to sort of accept, as true, but isn't willing to obviously admit that or say that he did it maliciously.
There are subcontractors not paid, and they have every right to be frustrated. I've been on the other end of that too. There's nothing that can be said that are going to make them feel okay about that. But that is not theft, and that is not a scam.
So the financing doesn't come through. So there's some subcontractors. He just highlighted one in a story that came out this morning of a guy who is out $100,000, and he characterizes it as like you stole that money from him.
Angel Soriano is a contractor and is out more than $100,000 after laying concrete for Hickey.
He hurt me so bad, hurt my family, hurt my company.
Like all the others, Soriano says he cannot go to the police since this is considered a civil matter.
Whatever comes around goes around, that's what I think.
What is your response when you hear that man's frustration of losing that money and blaming you for it?
So that man specifically, there was an argument about that because he was paid what was in his contract. He had significant change orders that he had done without ever calling him out until he was done, said, I just did more work and I'm owed money. So there was a dispute on that. In the end, though, I'm sure he was owed something. I don't doubt that. The company probably owed him something, and he has every right to be frustrated.
Yeah.
That's a terrible situation. I've been on both sides of that type of thing. It's not good. It's a terrible situation, especially when you have individuals out there who are really kind of, I call close to the blade.
Yeah.
They're out there actually pumping the mud and they're cutting the wood.
Blue collar and hard work.
Completely. That's not a good situation.
Yeah.
That's still not theft or fraud as he's wanted to classify.
What is it then?
When you have a company wind down, there's going to be a loss. There generally is. When you have the money not coming in to cover those debts, that's a terrible situation. That's why businesses go into this stuff and have their pricing according to that to handle those types of things.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not enough, right? It can still close a place. It did to Meridian.
Stay away from this guy.
Ivan Baca says Hickey failed to pay for heating and air conditioning work on a project, taking off with close to $85,000.
How does that impact your company?
Well, we just lose the money. Our guys did not get the bonuses what they should get.
So what happens to those subcontractors? They just sort of sucks to be them.
There were a lot that were settled out. The one who you're talking about who was in there, that was actually settled out as well. A lot of them were settled. I think that's kind of where he's also not drawing a line in the sand of who settled and who was still left holding the bag.
Yeah.
There were a number that were settled out on pennies on the dollar. Some got more, some got less. So it's all over the place.
So what they got is what they got. There's no money coming for them.
No,
basically.
At that point, there's nothing left.
Yeah. So I think the situation with this too is, Steve hasn't been charged, arrested, convicted of a crime related to that, but it also doesn't make it right. I think he's acknowledging there, there are contractors who are out a lot of money. Some were paid, pennies on the dollar for the work that he did, acknowledging the frustration that they feel. Now, I will say personally, I reached out as part of, doing some digging into this, because this isn't my area of expertise, construction and building and the ins and outs of all of that. I asked a contractor I've worked with several times, both on my home, on our last two studios. I ran all this by him this morning and said, is that usual? And he said, no. He said the last time he can remember, and he's been doing this for decades, that he got stiffed was in 2003. It had been some time. He said typically if a construction company, a builder is winding down, they try to do what's right. And they try to make things right and make sure people get paid. So Steve, for whatever reason, was not able to do that. And so he's got all these judgments, accusations against him with L&I that are just in black and white. And so that's not something that he can deny. But the question again is between kind of right and wrong, and should he have made or attempted to make those contractors whole, especially at a time where he was going through an agreement to buy a very big, expensive home, making huge lump sum payments toward that end. All right, I want to get to the third accusation against Steve Hickey that has resulted from all of this and give him a chance to respond to it. He is being accused of using his position as a fire commissioner in King County to access some of these scenes and more quickly in first responders to be able to get some of the really good video of the crime coverage he does that he puts out to his 1 million+ followers that he sometimes gets money for. So here's what Steve Hickey had to say about those accusations. The accusation being that you're using this position to sort of get to these scenes and to take video for your social media.
Which is absurd. I've never filmed a situation in the district that I serve. First, I want to be very clear with that. Okay. I've never gone and used that for my social media. Does not work that way. Second, my coming out, I would never go to a scene. If I went to a scene, you should come with me. So maybe we'll do an undercover where I go in and say, hey, I'm a commissioner. Right. Let's see how that works out for me.
So I will ask Jonathan Cho about what you're saying is that he filed the complaint, but there's some other people who are on the record as sharing similar sentiments. So I want to read a couple of those to you and have you respond to them. So this is from an EMT who doesn't want to use their name, understandably so. I've had an issue with Steve's use of department equipment to financially support his photography and videography business on social media. He uses his access as a commissioner to have radios to chase calls and then sells the content for profit.
False.
You've never used radios or any equipment, as he's saying.
No, you get that stuff. I have subscriptions online that are far better access than a fire department radio.
Yeah. He's also an EMT. On February 26, 2022, he arrived first on an accident, called it in over the radio, talked to the patient, then abandoned the patient to go back to his car to live stream it on TikTok.
No.
Never happened.
No. They've pulled the incident. It's not even in the town I serve. This is ridiculous.
So did something like that happen just not in the town you serve?
No, I was driving down Maple Valley Highway with my phone already mounted on the windshield, doing whatever I do. Yeah. I pulled up on an accident, called in so they could come and take it. Yeah. That's their call. That's not mine.
Did you, as an EMT, though, check on the patient, make sure the patient was fine?
No, they already had people coming. When I radioed in, they already had Renton PD coming. Yeah. They come and take that. I don't have any EMT gear with me. Yeah. I'm not going to go out and start rendering care. I'm going to make sure that there's people showing who have all of that and they can take care of it.
You don't have a duty to serve if you're up on a scene like that? There's no sort of duty?
If there was somebody in a life-threatening position, needed CPR, right? Maybe that, but I'm not coming. I don't have any equipment. I don't have anything.
But you didn't check on them, you said, or did you go check on them?
At that point, I walk up, I see that there's two cars, let them know, hey, you got two cars. It looks like they've collided in an intersection. You guys need to have people on out here. And they send people on out there. They take care of the call.
And you did you live stream it on TikTok though?
If it was on my dashboard, it would be on there, but I'm not live. It's not like, I have a call, I'm going to live stream.
Yeah. So that wasn't sort of an official response to a call in your job that you abandoned a patient as this characterization. Because this is the, an EMT told another EMT, this is the text that they send. Here's a new one. Steve is out doing his thing in Renton, comes across an accident and calls it over Fire One, does a triage, requests an MVA response, goes back to his car and live streams on TikTok before fire even arrives, leaving the patient with PD that he just triaged. Totally false?
No, I'm thinking through it as you're reading through it, remembering back because it's 2.5 years ago. No.
Yeah.
No, they take care of that stuff. Yeah. I don't go and take care of that.
So he's saying nothing improper, not using his position as a fire commissioner to maybe get to scenes quicker, to get video, to get better access. Here's one thing I want to touch on, though. Throughout our interview, and we're going to post the full interview tonight, he really was not happy with Jonathan Cho and essentially, painted it as Jonathan Cho going after these accusations and almost encouraging people to speak up, so to speak, about the accusations. And in fact, he told me that Jonathan Cho is the one who actually filed the official complaint with the fire district about his conduct that led to Steve Hickey taking a leave of absence.
I want to be very clear about this. Jonathan Cho's coming out saying, sources tell me. As a journalist, he made the complaint. That's a big deal. That matters a lot. So if you're going to go out and he went out and actually made the actual complaint to the fire department accusing me of abuse of power and using station equipment and I believe all this idea to push my social media.
I'm sorry, he made the complaint. Define that more.
He literally wrote the complaint as himself. I'm not uncovering him. He made it as himself and communicated, even said he wanted to do it by phone. They said, you need to do this in writing. Yeah. He made the complaint.
Okay.
As a journalist, you don't make the complaint so you can cover it. If somebody had made a complaint, I would see this much differently. Yeah. Jonathan Cho fundamentally made the complaint and then covered it and then put it out and says, well, sources tell me. Yeah. Sources don't need to tell you the thing you did.
So that was the first I heard of that. So I, of course, after our interview, reached back out to Jonathan Cho, someone I have a lot of respect for, and said, hey, is that true? Are you the one who was covering the story and decided to file the complaint with the fire district to sort of force Steve to step away? And he says that's not true. And he forwarded me the entire thread that he had with the fire district, the entire email thread. And in it, he has a request that's, as a journalist, basically saying, are you aware of these allegations against Steve Hickey? What is being done to investigate him? And after I followed up with Jonathan, he asked a woman named Tracy Stiles with the King County Fire District in question if she would be willing to confirm that he never filed an official complaint. And she did say in this email provided by Jonathan Cho, "Good morning, Jonathan. I can confirm that my understanding has always been that you are bringing forward allegations from others. And it certainly was not the intention of our press release to state you personally were making them, rather that you had brought them forward." So she says they're going to try to go and clear that up. I've asked Steve, do you have any sort of other evidence that would, suggest that Jonathan is lying about this? But it seems pretty clear that even the fire district says, no, it wasn't Jonathan Cho making the complaint. It was him as a journalist coming forward about complaints that other people had. All right, one more cut I want to play, because I think a lot of you are probably thinking what I'm thinking about this, which is, that's a lot of people saying stuff about one guy. We kind of went through that with the Semi Bird stuff, and things would just come out left and right about Semi Bird, and he'd have an excuse for every single one of them. And at some point, there's just this preponderance where it's like, what is going on here? So that is how I closed my conversation with Steve Hickey about all the allegations in their totality. So with all the construction stuff, and I think, you do journalism, and we were just doing a story today on a political candidate who, a lot of stuff comes out about him.
Sure.
And he always finds excuses for, it's not me, I'm the victim. So as a journalist, it goes back to that kind of where there's smoke, there's fire. And when you're talking about a couple dozen people who come out as like, Steve Hickey wronged me, like I'm a victim of his, you see why my antenna would go up.
Sure.
Because it's sort of like at some point, is it all of them? They're just mistaken, or is it you?
I've already said clearly the subcontractors have a reason to be unhappy. I'm not saying, and I don't like the word victim. I'm not a victim. I don't believe the other parties are victims. This is a tough situation. These are adults getting into these things.
If I was out $100,000, I'd be like, I'm a victim.
Victim.
So are they a victim of the market? Are they a victim of COVID? Are they a victim of a poorly run construction company?
To me, victim, you're getting into intent, saying somebody did this to you.
Yeah.
That's different. If I went in and just took your money, that's a victim. That's a crime. When we're dealing with extenuating circumstances here, and it goes, this is what the costs are, by all means, do you want to go dispute the lumber company with me? I'll go right along with you.
And you've never been charged with a crime related to any of it or anything like that. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's anything you could have or should have done better to try to make sure that company did not?
Yeah. My belief is no matter what, in the end, there's something that could have been done. I mean, I'd been through this back in 08, 09, and there were people who got through it, and there were some that got through and some that didn't. And it was easy to say, it's the market. And yeah, it is. But also, what could you have done differently? What do you learn from that? What can you do going forward? There's always something. I don't care if you get hit by a train leaving here. There's something you could have done. Right? There's always something.
Do you think this is a common occurrence for people who run construction companies?
It's a business that's tough with that. The margins are very thin, and it's on big numbers. So you're coming in making 10 to 20, some merch 25% on hundreds of thousands of dollars of transactions. So if you have a project like that project stall out and there's $90,000 or whatever it is of unpaid lumber, that's a big deal.
Why do you think that they're all coming out about you? If this is something that happens, sometimes construction companies go under, subcontractors aren't paid, people aren't happy, their work wasn't finished, they feel wronged. I feel like I'd be hearing more stories. Is it because of who you are, you think, and your following and your...
I think, once you had, so as I mentioned earlier, the superintendent on those projects was the son of the person that I got the home in Ravensdale with. So when Jonathan Cho goes on this fact-finding mission, they go, why don't you talk to these people who otherwise are in the past and we're trying to move on from and we're trying to figure out what life is after all of that. Right. And then he's going out and contacting me. He did the same thing when he came out to the fire department. He's coming out trying to ping people and say, well, did you know about this though? Oh, you think he's okay, but what about this? And it's just continue to try and drag this up. If this was something I was doing, I've been public for some time. I didn't just blow up last month. This has been years in the making. And so, I don't want to diminish people being frustrated, especially the subcontractors who lost money. I don't want to diminish that at all. But if this was some sort of organized thing, where were they 2-3 years ago? And still now somebody's coming and knocking on their door going, well, would you like to vent about it?
But sometimes that's what happens in news. Until you go ask somebody what happened, they're not going to talk about it. And they're like, you know what, I would like to vent about it.
Sure. But
the comments online, I know that these people are just social media things, but he took me for $25,000. He was supposed to build my house in West Seattle and ran with the money. Does that ring any bells to you, Scott? I mean, there's comments like that. So the videos get posted and you've got, a couple dozen people who are making claims, just maybe a handful in the video. And then you look at the comments and you've got people saying, he took me for money too. He was supposed to build my house for me. So it paints a picture of like this overwhelming amount of people spinning the same tale. And that's kind of hard to diminish in my mind.
So as I mentioned in the beginning,
Yeah.
Harrison, who was the superintendent, who was the previous owner's son, connected these dots of saying, hey, talk to Scotty,
Yeah.
specifically talk to them. Once you start putting that out there, and there's a company that closed down, and I was open about the fact that there were subcontractors. These are
Yeah.
there's public record of this stuff.
Yeah, you haven't excused that.
No, not at all, and I don't intend to. Even if I could say, to your point about victims, say, well,
Right.
it was this, it was all these things. In the end, it still happened.
Right.
It did. Like, there's no taking that back. So I'm not going to say, oh, they just need to suck it up. That would be extremely callous, and it's if I don't care. I've been sorting through this for years,
Yeah.
trying to settle this stuff.
So you decide. As I said, we're going to post our full interview with Steve Hickey, but this is a situation that has garnered national attention. And this is someone who, look, when I asked him to come in, that this isn't typically something we do on the show, interviews like that, taking up 40 minutes of the show. But this is someone who, has a huge following, who amassed it in a relatively short period of time. I know how hard that can be. And so I wanted to give him a fair chance to come in and go point for point on some of these things. Obviously, there's a nexus with the squatting issue. We can agree to disagree on whether he is a squatter in the true sense, but certainly I think, again, it goes back to right and wrong. Could he leave the house and live somewhere else while this is being adjudicated and not lose anything in the process? Yeah, because he's not fighting to stay in that house. That's not, in court what he wants. He wants to basically be paid for the money that he already spent trying unsuccessfully to buy the house. So that's a little bit of what we have for you today. We'll post that full interview online for all the other influencer followers to dive into, because this story has really gone all over the place. But you make your own decision about what you think. Is Steve Hickey someone who you want to continue to rely on for news and information, or does all of this add up and does it tell a tale to you?